Okay, so we just bought this light fitting at B&Q, and the idea is that this is going to replace the current light fitting in our lounge. So I have removed the light fitting that was currently in the lounge, and I have isolated all the cables. One of the things that we wanted to do was to move the light fitting so that it was a bit more central to the room, because currently it's quite far over. It's a bit difficult to see on camera, but basically it's very much to the right, which is not ideal really. So essentially we wanted to move it so that it was central to the room, which is basically where this hole is that I just made in the ceiling. And I made the hole with the knowledge that the joists in this house run from side to side. So I was hoping that what I could basically just do is make a hole a bit further along, and I would then be able to fish some cables across and connect the light fitting there. However, I've run into a bit of a problem. I assumed that this light fitting was up against a joist because it's a bit dark, but inside the ceiling there is some wood there, which I assumed was one of the joists. So I thought if I just moved along in a parallel motion, then I'd be able to get onto the edge of the same joist there. But when I drilled a hole through the ceiling, there was no joist there, which was a bit of an unpleasant surprise. And I've since realized that what is happening is that what this was connected to is not a joist at all, but just a piece of wood that was kind of stretched across between two joists to mount the light to. So I have gone into the garage and I've got my Boroscope, basically just a little camera on a long wire, and I can watch the feed on my laptop, and I've just attached it to one of these fishing poles. And if I go up through the hole that I made, you can see where the actual joist runs. It's not too far further down, but I'm a little bit wide of it currently. And then if we look on the camera, so that's the joist that I just showed you. And if we turn to the left, weirdly, you can see that there's another piece of wood there for some reason. I'm not quite sure what that's for. It's some kind of a structural thing. And as you can see there, it doesn't go all the way to the top of the floorboards. So I'm hoping that what I can do is basically fish some cables over the top of this and then down to where the current light fitting is now. Okay, so here we go, going through my hole, and you can now see that's the joist that I missed. And then if we turn to the left, you can see this weird piece of wood that kind of goes down between the two joists. And if I angle this very carefully, I can actually go over the top of this. And there you can see the lighting circuits. And you can just see at the bottom of the picture there, that's the cables that go to the current light fitting. So I'm thinking that what I might be able to do is fish a new cable over this wood beam here and down to where that current light fitting is, and I can basically just extend that circuit and bring it to the new position. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a new hole which is up against the joist, so that when we fit the new light fitting, we're not just going straight into the plasterboard. The light fitting isn't actually very heavy, so probably we'd get away with putting it into the plasterboard, but if you're going to do a job, you may as well do it right. Okay, so I've drilled a new hole, or actually two holes, because the first one I drilled went right slap bang into the joist, so there was no room on the side for me to put cables through. But it doesn't really matter because the rose that goes on the light is much bigger than both of the holes that I've drilled. So you're not going to see that once the light fitting is actually in place. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to run two different cables across. One will be for the lighting circuit that goes around to all the lights, and the other one will be for the switch feed. I could actually get away with just putting a single cable, which would just be essentially like an extension to the light fitting itself. The problem with that is if someone is doing maintenance later down the line, it's going to be a bit confusing as to what's going on, whereas if there's a switch feed and a connection to the circuit, it just makes it a lot easier to understand for anyone who's tried to do electrical work. So I have a cunning plan, and that is to attach this Boroscope to the actual cable itself and then feed the cable into the ceiling. The cable is quite thick and quite rigid, so I should be able to essentially bend it in a way that it will feed over the top of that joist. But if I've got the Boroscope attached to it, it makes it a lot easier for me to see what I'm doing. Okay, so this time I'm going to try and feed the Boroscope through this one because this is a much smaller hole. It's going to be much easier to aim for this than it is to try and aim for this. So I think we'll probably have more success going the other way. Right, just had to pause briefly because the camera had some problems, but here we go again for round 2. Okay, we're in. Okay, we're running along the floorboards here. Aha, there's my hole. Look at that. So I've got an angle now for this one. Can I do a hole in one? Oh, I'm so close.
Need all those pliers?
Yeah, maybe if you can try and grab it from the other end. Okay, I think that's about as close as I can get it. Oh, I can see you.
That's as close as I can get.
Oh, you're joking. You could literally see your face. Success! Hooray! We have now successfully managed to get the cable across. So now I need to do a second cable. So to run the second cable through, I'm going to use this Boroscope as a guider. So that's going to essentially help me guide the second cable through to the same hole again. Tidy! Okay, so I've now connected both of the cables and pushed them back into the ceiling. I haven't shown you my work because, quite honestly, it's not my best work. But it is connected safely using proper connector blocks and it is all insulated, so it's not going to cause any house fires or anything like that, but it's just not particularly beautiful. But I had to do something that would be able to fit through this tiny hole in the ceiling. When we lift the carpets upstairs to redo them, I can lift up the floorboards at that point and do a bit of a tidy up, but this is safe for now. So now the only thing left to do is to connect up the light fitting to my new cables. Okay, so I've now prepared my cables. We have this one which comes from the lighting ring, which goes around to all the lights in the circuit, and this one which goes to the switch on the wall. And what I've done is I've connected the live of the lighting ring to the live of the switch. So that will go down and out to the switch and then back up through this neutral cable, which I've also labeled as live because this is where the live returns from the switch. And that will then go into the light and that will be what will control whether the light is on or off. So I've also done the attachment that goes in the ceiling. So the last thing to do is to connect everything up and put the light in place. Right, so we have our light fitting in place and as you can see it works, which is very good news. And I'm now working on filling the holes that I made earlier. This is a pretty smart idea of Rachel's, which is basically to put something behind the plasterboard and then thread some string through, and then we can put the little plug that I made when I drilled the hole back in place and hold it in place with some string while I put polyfill around it. And once the polyfill is set, it'll be pretty solid, but the string is just there to hold everything in place while I'm doing it.
I would really like to paint the wall now.
Oh my god. Right, so we've now patched all the holes in the ceiling that we made. Rach did a first patch, and once that had dried, we could then do a second coat. And I've tried to basically match it in with the contoured ceiling around it. I think once that dries and we get a bit of paint on that, you'll probably never know that there was ever a hole there. So I think that's worked out pretty well. Right, so it's now a couple of days later and I've now painted the patches. And as I suspected, it's actually almost impossible to see now where they are. If I look really carefully, I can actually spot them, but honestly, no one's ever going to know. So I think that's a successful job done, and that really is a big improvement on the position of the light as to where it was before, which is basically there. So much more central to the room now, makes a lot more sense. And in other news, we've also painted two of the walls, the side wall here and the back wall, and also the alcove as well, where the door is. Looks a lot better with white, I must say, a lot more modern, and actually opens up the room a little bit, makes it feel a bit bigger. We've also fitted a new curtain rail and some new curtains. These are actually pretty necessary given the position of the TV, because in the afternoons, when the sunlight bounces off the buildings across the street, the glare on the TV is pretty severe. You can't really see very much unless you close the curtains. So these help a lot, but they're not complete blackout curtains, so they don't make it completely gloomy in here when they're closed. It's still quite pleasant.